Hello, everyone, and welcome to our panel on hiring the best marketers. We're going to take a minute to settle in here, make sure that everyone is ready for the event. In the meantime, can you let us know if you are hiring, and if so, what roles you're hiring for in the comments? And we can use that to help customize our discussion to what you most want to know. While we're waiting on responses, I'll ask the panelists. Do you have any open roles right now? Who are you looking for?
Go for it, Brandy.
Oh, well, we don't have any specific open roles right now. We kind of built out our team a little bit robustly at the end of last year because we actually started January with a bunch of projects. I was like, oh, well, let's get our house in order. But we also tend, I don't have any full-time employees. I run my agency, I run my entire business without any full-time employees. So that's a bit of a different business model. And honestly, I thought I would never have employees, but we're not hiring right now.
Yeah, on my side, so much like you, Brandy, I don't really run in-house staff. Through all my agencies that I've run, I've always tried to run super lean teams, like no more than 3 or 4 people on a team, and then get some really good trusted contractors. So like build books of contractors who can just do stuff. However, that being said, in the next kind of 6 to 8 weeks, I will be opening up 2 positions. I'm looking at technical marketers myself. So I'm looking for primarily kind of like marketing data analysts, and more kind of technical stack setup type of thing. So not your typical, front end marketer that, creates beautiful things, but we still create beautiful things, but they're in the background. So yeah, that's really where I'm at the moment. But much like you, hiring contract work is always very different to hiring full-time. But the flexibility you have in that is you're not bound by one social media person. You can have 5 social media people, each specializing in a platform. So in my opinion, it's actually a very, and I've done this for over a decade, it's a very strong strategy to go with. You always have the best talent on hand.
Excellent. All right. It's been a couple minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and kick off this panel. Welcome, everyone. I always like to start with the goals for any conversation we're having. And we're entering a period of constant change in the marketing world between cookie apocalypse, the rise of search generative experience, and all of the other challenges that are heading our way this year. And so hiring has never been more important in marketing, and making sure you have someone who is really ready to hit the ground running and help your business through all these changes is top of mind for so many people. So our collective goal here is to help you figure out how to hire the best marketers, even in difficult times. So a Marketing Week study recently found that marketing leaders are taking on more and more work for the same amount of pay. If the idea of running a hiring process right now feels overwhelming to you, Mayple can help. We're experts in hiring marketers after interviewing thousands of marketers to find the top 5% of them. And we match you with the perfect marketer for your business, including the marketers on our call today. So if you're interested in working with anyone you meet, or if you just want help with the hiring process to find the best marketer, I'll drop a link to Mayple and we can help you out. Cool. Really quickly before we get started, I want to introduce our panelist. Brandy is the founder of FieryFX. She literally wrote the book on hiring. It's called Hire Help, HIGH-ER help. How businesses use experts to shortcut growth, improvement, and capacity. Andrew Royal is the founder of Full Stack RevOps. And Daniel Johnson is the founder of We Scale Startups and a Google For Startups mentor. Thank you all. Welcome so much to our panel.
Thanks.
Happy to be here.
Glad to hear it.
Likewise.
As I mentioned, this is going to be a difficult year. We've talked a little bit about who you're hiring now, but as we zoom out to 2024, which marketers do you think will be in the most demand to handle these challenges, and why?
Who wants to start that one?
Well, I figured Daniel, you weigh in.
Can you repeat the question again?
Sure. As we look at 2024, challenges like cookie apocalypse, AI in search, and in all areas of marketing, which types of marketers are going to be most in demand in 2024 and why?
So I would argue, I mean, from my perspective at least, like I'm still looking for the same types of people regardless. A lot of the challenges that have kind of appeared are challenges that will always happen. And like the kind of person I'm looking for is someone who is sort of very proactive in sort of realizing that these challenges will occur and finding ways around them. So I don't think much has changed in terms of that. I think I'm just going to be continuing to look for the same type of person who, just like the best kind of person in that regard. So like very much someone who is quite entrepreneurial in their role, someone who takes a lot of ownership. The rest of it I can teach. The rest of it, the actual marketing bit, that's not the difficult bit. It's getting someone who naturally wants to do what they do. But I'm curious to hear from Brandy and Andrew.
Brandy, I can jump in quickly because I actually just want to address one single point there.
Do your thing.
I don't know, it's going to come up later on in the conversation, but I just want to kind of put it up here now so we can remember it. And that's like, you can't train soft skills, but you can always train hard skills. So I think as hiring managers, we need to be very aware of that. That being said, with the advent of everything that's happening at the moment in terms of, as you say, cookie apocalypse, the AI, I think we're going to start seeing the rise of the technical marketer. I really do. I think you're going to find more and more kind of people that were in the background that didn't, no one really knew who they were. Now they're really going to come to the forefront. Marketers that are versed in machine learning, marketers that are versed in large language models. This isn't something necessarily that a generalist marketer looks at. They may have taught themselves, which is great because it's a skill that's needed. But that true technical marketer, I think we're going to see the rise of them. And I think also the definition of a technical marketer may change a little bit as to what it was before. I think it's the scope is going to open up on it. So I do think that we will see more companies hiring marketing staff who can utilize AI, who can utilize machine learning to better put information out. And the other thing that I think we're going to see I'm going to put it through the RevOps, through the revenue operations lens, but I think it works in marketing operations. It works in general marketing, and that's data. I think more and more companies are becoming so many companies have never really listened to their data. They've always gone on, how the market's sort of reacting to it. So I think we're going to see a lot more, and this is where the true technical market comes in, and that's data analysis. With cookies now, going, there's going to be new ways of tracking. The actual data that comes out is going to be, a lot of it is, Google Analytics is good. I'm not knocking it in any way, but it's limited in certain aspects. So you're going to start looking at more and more marketers who are versed in kind of mixed panel or other event-based tracking systems. So I think we are going to see a subtle shift. That being said, the marketing staff that we've hired for the past 10, 15 years, they'll still be there. They're still relevant, but for sure they are still relevant. But I do think we're going to see a new wave of hiring into the technical side.
I'll pick up on what Andrew said. In in the last, I don't know, even 2 decades, the rise of marketing operations is just simply like technology is no longer an option.
Yeah.
You have to be able to understand how it's going to get implemented to develop something that's going to work when you implement it that way. This is like the long and the short of it. And there's going to be a whole bunch of new titles that come out of like people looking for the combination of the skill sets. But the base understanding, really that soft skill set that's most desirable, is able to change, because ability to change has always been necessary. It's now the rate of change is unheard of, and it's probably only going to get faster. So we can't just rest on the laurels of the things that we learned or the skills that we mastered, I don't know, 18 months ago. They have to continue to evolve. And so when we think about who we're hiring next, it's, yes, have you heard of or are you aware of? Because that helps frame, are they staying up on things? But not, are you master of, and do you have those skills? Because the skills that we actually need by the time we get them trained, we don't know what those are yet.
I'm
sorry. Go for it, Danny.
I'm kind of curious, and actually, I'm going to throw a question to you guys because it's interesting hearing this perspective. So what we're finding in terms of hiring is that everyone can use the technology. They understand what an LLM is. They understand how ChatGPT works. Most of them are Gen Zs. And it's kind of like even the people who don't identify as nerds or particularly technical, they can explain with quite detail like how LLMs as a concept works, which is really interesting. What I've been looking for is more commercial understanding. I have an expectation that they know what analytics is. They can do basic tracking. They arguably could do JavaScript event tracking, even if that's not their focus. And I still wouldn't even call them a technical marketer, just because that's part of my definition of doing their job now. The thing that I find really difficult is actually getting people to understand the commercial implications of marketing and how it works on a bigger scale, and also being able to put themselves in the shoes of other people in the company, whether that's finance, whether that's operations or the CEO, and see their perspective and say, this is how I'm contributing to it. Like that is the really great skill. And also, just to be the devil's advocate here, you said you can't teach soft skills, and I kind of think you can, but maybe again, like, please tell me, you guys have more experience.
Yeah. So I just want to touch on that. Sorry, Brandy, I do just want to touch on that a little bit. I think what's happening at the moment with the rise of AI, with the rise of of technical systems, with the rise of cookies, what's happening is an information overload. So if you're going to start hiring staff and expecting them to do all of that, you're going to have subpar results. You can't expect a Gen Z who's maybe got 2 or 3 years experience to know everything across that. Yeah, sure, they can touch on them, but you're not going to get it done correctly. The other thing about tech, I'm not talking about necessarily running the tech in terms of like sending out an email campaign. I'm talking about configuring a tech stack. So this goes beyond any kind of external, no external messaging. This is the nuts and bolts of it. And as tech evolves and grows, and more tech is hitting the market, I think the technical market still exists on that side. And cool, maybe you want to call them, IT sports. You want to call them something like that. At the end of the day, you have to, like, I'm going to take MailChimp, for example. You need to be a marketer to be able to set it up correctly. You can't just, you can't just have IT knowledge. You have to have the marketing knowledge in order to do it correctly. So I'll push back a little bit on the anyone can do it. Yeah, sure, anyone can do it. But do you have the resources? If you're hiring one person, you're expecting them to do 10 different things, you're not going to get the results as if you had to hire 5 people, get them to focus on 2 items each. Because at the end of the day, what you're going to see is if your people are optimized correctly, it's going to drive your revenue. So it's part of that people aspect of the operations. Is I've seen it. I've seen staff that have come in and they just expect way too much of them, and they end up burning out, or they leave the company, or it's a poor company culture. Or so for me personally, like, I'm willing to put a bit of money behind it. I'm willing to invest in my staff, because at the end of the day, I know that if I have 5 team members who are optimized versus 1 team member who's spread across everything, my profit's going to be lower at the end of the day. So for me, I run a revenue operations agency. For me, at the end of the day, you got to look at what is going to drive the highest revenue. Profit margin might be a little bit low to start off with, and I'm just saying this in the beginning, but you'll reap the rewards later on.
And I think I would frame, I agree with that, and I would frame the, I don't know that you can't teach soft skills, but I think the foundation of a successful engagement, whether it's an employee you hire in full-time, a contractor, or even an agency that you're working with, is a values alignment. That we are all going to prioritize in the same way. And there's nothing, like, every company has a different set of actual values, not like the things we just say we do and hang on the wall, but the way that we make decisions, the way that we prioritize, the values that drive that. If we're aligned, conversations get easier, communication gets easier, prioritization gets easier. If we're not aligned, there's always this underlying friction. And so I think when I say soft skill, I hire for a values alignment, because the rest can be coached, taught, experienced, etc. And then when it comes to, it's the generalist versus the specialist debate has been around forever, and it just keeps coming around. And the reason I built my team the way I built my team is because I kind of believe in the Avengers model, where we've got people who are very special. Working together, we can do all the things. But if I wanted one person to be able to be Captain America and the Scarlet Witch and it dilutes everything. So looking to make sure that we can get people into a specialty. With back to what Daniel said about the understanding the empathy, there's a communication piece and a context piece that's also necessary. If we're going to work as the Avengers, we've got to have really tight communications so that the Hulk's not smashing the thing that Captain America needed to use next. So that's sort of our approach and our thought process around it.
So I'll throw something on for the. Sorry, I just want one little thing here quickly. So, Brandy, you picked up on it. I'd love to just hear one words from Brandy and Daniel on this comments. Is one of the, for me, hiring is hiring. It's there, but the most difficult thing to do is hire for culture, and to get that in 3 interviews is so difficult. But your best hires are the hires you do get for culture, because as you say, Brandy, you can teach everything else as long as the culture. And every single company has different company culture. So, you know, it's what I believe in may not be what Daniel and Brandy believe in. And trying to find that person that's there, like that should be the only point that you should hire on. Everything else, soft skills. Yeah, I mean, you know, you can teach communication to a certain extent. You can teach just, language on how you write it to a certain extent. But that culture, you can't teach culture. You can't change culture. If a person comes into a company where the culture is completely different, you're going to have churn. So yeah, sorry, I just wanted to throw that 2 cents in.
Would anyone like to talk about how they hire for company culture?
I'm like, I'd love to.
Yeah.
But also, I will preface this with, we built a very unique team. And so my business is 12 years old, and I didn't start building a team until I was 4 years in, because I didn't want to do it the way it had been done. My parents opened a restaurant the year I was born. We had a bunch of employees. This is the girl who got called when anybody called out sick. Like, I didn't want any of it. So I resisted hard, which is the way my company got built differently. But I also had, when I worked in corporate, I worked at several large technology companies. I had a hiring manager who never kept an employee he hired. The only employees he had were the ones that he inherited when he got the job, because he only hired for hard skills. I was like, oh, if I needed any example in the world of how not to do this, here we go. A manager who literally no one he hired stayed around more than a year. So the way we approach it is, first, we are really clear about our values. You can't hire on culture. You can't hire on something you don't understand. So don't even try if you aren't really clear about what your culture is. And so we have expressed our values. We have an entire document about what our values look like in our business. Like, what does it mean for us to give a damn? What does it mean for us to be a no judgment zone? Like, very clear, because if I'm not clear, I can't do my job on hiring. Second, it's the first thing we talk about. Like, if someone is interested in working with our company, I go, great, go check out our values. Here's our document, and let me know what you think. And the reason it's that broad and general is because our first value is give a damn. And if you don't have anything to say about it, I can fix that. Mm-hmm. So it's unique based on our values. And then they talk to me We see if there's an alignment, and then we do a test project. I don't do a crap ton of interviews. I don't think there's a value in that. It's like, do you feel value aligned? And then can you show up value aligned in a project? That's how we do it.
I really like that. I think, yeah, I think that concept of trying to cut back on the interviews. Obviously you need to meet a person to get whether they are going to even be able to be a fit or not. But I agree. Just, go and try and cut the recruitment process down as quickly as possible. Up here in Canada, when I first got here, I joined a couple of companies. I mean, I went through one job that had eight steps in the process. And by the end of it, I had fatigue, but I got the job. But I was fatigued by the time I got into the job. So, these are the issues there. So I think hiring is a very fine balance in terms of, and this may lead into some other questions, but it's a very fine balance in how many touch points do you have with the candidate and how do you actually run those points, so you get enough information and they fall in love with you.
I still find it difficult through the interview process to really understand, like, you'll go through the interview process and you'll chat to the person and you'll think, this is great. This person is absolutely lit. Like, they're going to kill it. And I'm so excited. And they come on board and everything's great for the first few months and then they kind of fizzle off. And like hiring for that culture. And I think so many people don't really understand the difference between the culture that they write down on a document and say to people like, this is our culture, isn't it cool? And the things that they actually care about and believe in, because I think that kind of requires a bit of a self-awareness and emotional understanding, which is just not something that we sort of think about when it comes to work in terms of like, we talk about it, but I think it's very often people with strong self-awareness and emotional understanding are those who've either like had to understand it for some various reason through life experience. And then as a result, it can be difficult because, there's very little context. What I do find interesting is that young people have a very clear understanding of the kinds of company that they want to work in and the people they want to work with. And they're very clear and very much like, if this doesn't work for you, then goodbye. Which is great. And it makes my life so much easier. And also like, they do try to define the culture. Like, I think if you don't define it to other people, people will define it to you, which I also think applies to marketing. Like, if you don't sort of brand your project, people will assign their own branding to it. And as a result, you have to sort of control it on the offset. I think, like, I've never worked in a big company. I've never worked with any great leadership or bosses. I've hired quite a bit and I really enjoy it. And I've YOLO'd everything. Like, I was just trying to figure out and be the best boss. And I made every classic mistake along the way. In fact, I still do. Like the one I'm, trying not to be friends with everyone. You're not besties with absolutely everyone. But on the other side of that, I agree with the interviews because, every interview goes well. I mean, very few people get to the interview stage and if they're not going to interview well. I think marketers are really good at talking about themselves. So that's one thing. Maybe I'm just projecting there.
We can position the crap out of anything.
Exactly. Yeah. And the other part is, as part of the Google for Mentors program, there was actually quite a few different interviews. And I actually found their interview process really good. Like, I was very fatigued. I was frustrated. I kind of wish they would be a bit more clear, but I think that's more just enterprise corporate rubbish. But the questions they were asking and the process they went through, it was incredibly clear that the people that I was speaking to knew exactly what they were looking for and had decades of experience. Now, we're a startup, we don't have the same resources as Google. But it's really interesting to see that and try and figure out, like, where does that line lie? Because I don't know. I'm still experiencing that.
How do you all structure your hiring processes to find the top performing talent?
We talked about mine. Like, literally,
Yeah.
It's that simple.
Yeah. So I think for me, the best hires that I've ever made haven't been on jobs. I hadn't got any job openings at that time. I didn't even have like a site to say send us your CV, guys. The people just reached out. Always the best hires. Now that was in a situation where we were in person, and we were there. Hiring for culture in a remote situation, not easy. Because what is your remote culture? You know, in an office, you've got a water cooler, you've got team building events on a regular basis, you engaging with people one-on-one. Remote culture has become incredibly difficult. And I've seen so many companies fail at it, where they think they have a culture, but actually there's no culture there. In fact, it's just a toxic workplace because there's no definition there. So jumping back onto the question, what is it, how do you attract? So, you know, I think with candidates, I mean, you can go into neuroscience on this side of things, but there's a sympathetic reaction between the brain and the gut. Gut feel, trust me, it works. And your brain thinks it works as well. So for me, I've been pretty reactionary on my gut. If the person feels right and they align with the culture, but they feel right, then I go for it. I hired a social media manager a while ago. I had the job up for like 12 weeks or something like that. I went through a bunch of interviews and no one stuck. She came in at like $10,000 more a year than I advertised price, and I hired her because, you know, it was that gut feeling from the first interview that I had with her. It was, I know that I was going to goes down. Interestingly, she's actually one of my contractors now. She's followed me through 3 companies. So that's just testaments in how I trust my gut when it comes to hiring. If it feels right. Yeah.
I think I relate a lot to that. I think a lot of the best hires have not been people who've applied through the application. They've been people who are sliding into my DMs saying, I've created this project because I thought it was cool and I wanted to send it to you. If you like it, do you want to hire me? And it's often the people who are persistent and kind of continue that, because it's that kind of like proactive behavior that I'm desperately seeking, at least from my perspective and my culture, for the kinds of problems that we're looking for. And I find it really, really difficult to find, because you only really care so much. And the people who create these kind of things care very deeply. And, you know, that's a very difficult thing to teach. So usually they slide in. But in terms of the interview process, usually it's application. I also don't look for, I mean, my grades were so bad, I never got into university. So like, I don't really care. Although interestingly, a lot of the Oxbridge people are like really good. So, I mean, swings and roundabouts. CV, but basically like, I'm looking for someone who's hungry and I will teach them everything. Like, even if they're just a fresh grad from somewhere with like no real work experience, I want to see them create like random projects. Athletes, sports professionals, people who are like, you know, national fencer at 21 and then retired. Like, it shows enthusiasm and like proactiveness. So that's, I mean, again, I'm going off topic here, but anyway, CV, I have a chat with them. I give them a project to do, something kind of difficult, paid. I give them like a while to do it, and they can just fit it in whenever. And if that works, I then get like the team interview, which is like mainly their department, as a vibe check. And then, yeah, then it's a gut feel. And I try to lean on the side of like not hiring, because I feel like hiring a bad person is significantly worse. And like the approach that we usually take is like, generally people come on board and they stay with us for a couple of years, and I train them really comprehensively. So we are really looking for specific people. But it's interesting because you're talking about like the right kinds of people and the culture fit. I'm thinking there's 2 people mainly that I've hired in like for the past however many years. And those 2 people have been like head and shoulders above everyone else. And it's really interesting because I'm trying to figure out how to like define them, or how to like specify them in terms of expectation, like why they're so good. So it's interesting. Yeah. Anyway, sorry guys, if someone else is wondering who I was referring to and they're watching this video.
So just to touch on that, I had a really interesting one where I had because you mentioned graduate. So I also didn't go to university. or didn't finish
Nice.
it. I went to university. I just didn't finish university. But yeah, I had a guy slide into my DM. So in South Africa, it's slightly different to the North. Your term starts in the January, ends in the December.
How's it?
I think a guy slid into my inbox on like the 15th of December. So he had literally just graduated with a degree in media production, like in actually like video editing. He just slid into my DM. So I was like, oh, okay, well, look I gave him a project. It was actually a writing project because I didn't need a writer at that time. He wrote just the most incredible piece. Came in for the interview. He wasn't a native English speaker. He was actually second language English speaker. And the copy, honestly, I did not expect that. He came in, he just learned. All he wanted to do was just consume. And he ended up doing web development. He ended up doing graphic design. He was good. He was really, really good. So, these little gems slide in, you got to be open to it at all times. Like, I wasn't keen at all. I just kind of thought, oh, well, let me see. I had no intention to hire. And he just kind of became one of my employees and was really, really great. So.
We've talked a lot about the greatest employees. I'd love to hear who is, or not who is, we're not going to name anybody here, but can you tell a story of a time you hired one of the worst people you've ever hired and what it taught you about the hiring process, how it changed how you hire moving forward?
I've got a humdinger if nobody else wants to start.
Oh, go, Andrew.
So I trusted my gut incorrectly. It was that 1 out of 50 times that I was incorrect. And it was horrible. So they interviewed incredibly well. They came with incredible references. I didn't really check the culture. That was probably my downfall there. But yeah, honestly, I know if they did like 30 minutes of work a day and the rest of the time just sit on their cell phone, like it burnt a little bit. South Africa is very difficult to fire staff. It's actually almost impossible to fire staff. For the South Africans on this group, you know what I'm talking about. So I eventually got a way through it to go about it. But honestly, I was, I talked about my best hire. He came like 6 months after I got burnt. So I was not keen. I was not ready. So yeah, he kind of gave me faith again that my gut does actually work. But it was horrible. I've never, as I said, like interviewed phenomenally well. Their references were off the charts. They got, like, every person that I spoke to just gave them the highest accolades. Had good experience. Had worked at some big companies as well. And I don't know. I mean, I guess that was it. I didn't hire the culture there. That was my problem. I didn't hire the culture. I hired for his skills because I wanted a specialist. So I hired it for hard skills. Didn't work. Taught me a lesson. Don't only rely on hard skills. Don't only, just feel it, get that gut, make sure that the culture's aligned. Because everyone that I've hired or I've been in companies that I've hired, if the culture fit doesn't exist, those people are going to leave. 3 months, 6 months, a year down the line, they're not going to retain a staff.
Hopefully, you don't take everybody else out before they go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I hired this partner. Well, not she wasn't a partner. I forgot the exact title, but she worked at McKinsey. Had the fanciest CV I think I've ever seen. I was so jealous. Like, yeah. I was very, very intimidated and very impressed. Basically, she was leaving the corporate world because she was kind of bored of it and wanted to work in startups and thought that this is a really interesting approach. So I was super excited to bring her on board, and I felt like an alien to her. The method of communication, like the words that came out of my mouth were not the words that I felt she heard. And I'm all about that nonviolent communication and being really good with communication, because every issue in our company comes down to communication. I've eventually realized, but just like, my expectation management was so misplaced because, like, I'd give her, I said when she came on board, I was like, we've got some really cool projects. It was an e-com platform. We want you to develop this like really extensive price elasticity of demand report. And she absolutely killed that. It was super interesting, really, really insightful. We used that in a billion different ways. And then I also asked her to buy a tent for a conference we were going to just off Amazon, and just make sure obviously it aligns with the pitch of our stand. And like everything there messed up, like everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. And it just kind of continued. And really it was my fault, like, to not clarify stuff. Like I explained it, but I didn't really explain it in a way that we both understood. So that was like a really big learning, because that was incredibly stressful. It was a very small startup and I was spending so much of my time managing. The other one, which was sort of a similar situation with this guy who interviewed really well, very sort of different experience, but just super enthusiastic. And unfortunately, when we started working together, I found that he had a lot of like personal issues which affected his professional life. And I tried to be as accommodating as possible, because I'm all about that mental health, and like I've totally been in the same position. But things were deteriorating and it wasn't getting to a point. And it's really difficult dealing with those kind of things, because a lot of them were sort of emotional based, and like how do you learning that takes difficult situations or lots of experience, or both. And yeah, so eventually we ended up parting ways, and it was really interesting because we came to the conversation, we did it really well, and he seemed to really understand. Like I did everything I could to try and sort of help him, and the meeting went really well. And then just afterwards we started getting like hate messages in our reviews from him and all sorts. So like both of these experiences were very good learning opportunities about how important it is to like that initial feeling, and also like the importance of firing fast for everyone's sake. I used to really struggle with that, because I felt so much responsibility, but then at the same time, like you really do people a disservice by keeping them on when they're not going to work. I'm not sure if I can swear on this, so I won't. But if someone's if they're not a F yeah, they're an F no, and I've kind of like I've come to realize that a lot.
Yeah, some of the worst, I think most painful. Like, fortunately, I don't have any like they tried to burn the whole thing down stories. Although I have some clients that have those stories. The worst ones are just this mediocre. Just really not bad enough that you have to like, but bad enough that they're, like Daniel said, like taking and eking and sucking the life out of the people that they're working with, because it takes too long to part ways with them. Like it, and it was hard. I think anybody who has a heart has a hard time firing, but understanding that it's really doing a disservice to everybody, especially if they are damaging the rest of the organization with their presence there. Or like even clients, like if clients are suffering, I'm like, then that's just it's a non-starter. And yes, either they're an FES at the beginning, and if it's even like a doubt, then that's a no.
In our last 20 minutes or so, I want to move us to one of the biggest questions I know I hear about hiring marketers, which is, do I need a full-time person, a freelance person, or an agency? And how do I tell?
Brandy, you kick us off with this one.
Well, okay, so it's a little bit kind of like, how do you hire on culture? Is you have to be really, really clear about what you need, what outcomes you're after, to be able to answer that question. And if you're not clear, then you start with somebody who can help you get clear. And maybe that's a marketing consultant. Like in the beginning, when I first started my company, I was building websites, and I almost quit building them all together because I hate doing work that doesn't get results. And I will tell you, no one knows what they need from a website. They know what they like, they know what's pretty, they know what somebody else told them they needed, but they don't actually know what role the website is going to play in their company. And so my job as a person who is going to build this asset for them was to help them figure that out, because nobody comes knowing. So if you are looking at hiring, if you are not beyond a doubt clear about what results you want from this thing, I would say don't hire a full-time employee. They're not going to know what to do. You're not going to know what to do. You're going to spend a ton of time trying to figure it out together, and they're going to get maybe frustrated, burnt out. Who knows? Like, it doesn't matter if they're a great culture fit if you are unclear. So get clear. And if you need help getting clear, that's where a consultant comes in. That's where good agencies come in. If you are really clear and the need is compartmentalized, like it's for a specific client, again, you might look at freelancers in that case. Honestly, the reason I don't have any full-time employees is, one, I never wanted to be anyone's everything. I don't enjoy that relationship because I have things that I expect out of that relationship that I don't want to have to expect. Like, I don't want to be in charge of your time. It's not something I need to do. And two, I don't want to be anybody's everything, because then that parting of ways is even harder for me. So it was really more about me and the things I'm comfortable with. Second, I wanted a workforce that would come, learn, do things, take that information out into the world, apply it, use it, learn other things, and then come back. I wanted them to be dynamically learning from more sources than just this one. So those were the reasons that I was clear about that structured my workforce. But for my purposes, and when I help guide clients, I'm like, don't do the paperwork of a full-time employee if you don't know exactly what you need from it. Go do the work to clarify if that's what you really need. Some people cannot imagine running a company without full-time employees. Cool. Be really clear. And if you hire an agency, the first thing you work with them on is what they're going to do for you if they don't come with that information. Yeah. All right, so there's my, like, what, I don't know, 45 cents.
So I've got an interesting take on that. So I'm also the type of person, don't hire a full-time employee just for the sake of hiring a full-time employee. So me right now, what I'm doing, I'm contracting. So I've got a bunch of freelance contract people that I manage. I pass work over to them. They bring it back. Obviously, I have to be there. I have to, do the QA on the side of things. But what I found in my previous agency was I was doing that in the beginning, but then it got too much. I had 20 contractors that I was trying to juggle. So what did I do? I hired a social media person. That social media person was then the contract manager. So they would manage all of the contractors under that particular branch. So I did this kind of like pyramid out on that. So honestly, it's a tough question to have. I don't think there's any right answer. I really don't think that there's a right answer to this. You mentioned it. It depends on how you want to do it, essentially. The differences is with freelancers, you've got flexibility, but you may also have subpar work, and you got to be prepared for that potentially. There is that, especially with the amount of VAs that are around at the moment. Unless you've got a really good vetted book of VAs, like that's tough. On the agency side of things, I'm an agency. I'll always want to work. I'll always take that work on. But realistically, on an agency side of things, it doesn't make sense to hire an agency if they're only doing one single task. You don't want to hire an agency because you want them to become your department. So you want them to take everything over and their staff. So it's not a single person. You're actually dealing with a single point of contact, but you're dealing with an entire team on that side. How they structure their business, they structure their business as long as it gets done at the end of the day. I think there's no right answer. I don't think there is a right answer here. What question I might pose to Brandy and Daniel, though, is does the hiring strategy change if you're a startup as opposed to an enterprise or a larger company? How does your hiring process change depending on what stage you are in your business operations? Because I've thought about that a lot, and I don't have an answer to it. It's kind of that question that's open-ended all the time in my mind.
So I'll throw in an answer for that one, because that is something that I think about a lot. It's interesting because startups are run by founders who are emotionally vested in the success or failure of the company. And when you work for a startup compared to an enterprise, and I say this as someone who hasn't really worked for an enterprise, the Google thing is a voluntary role. You only, when you join, you're expected to share in the mission, and that might be consciously or subconsciously, but the founders are expecting it. And I think it's very difficult, and I say this as an agency to startups, to be an agency to startups, because the client expectations are one thing, your ability to communicate effectively is another, and often the level of funding is not that of an agency. When it works fantastically. And that's kind of, I think the word agency is such a broad term, so it's kind of difficult because lots of different types of organizations fall under that umbrella. For me, I had a team of 16 full-time employees, and that seriously affected my mental health. I'd stopped being creative, developing ideas, and I just sort of, I was stressing about, because if one client started saying odd things about, are we going to get their contract next month? My thought was, I've got all these, people on payroll, and I need to make sure that they pay. And one of the problems with startups, we had a client in the States last year who just went AWOL and owed us a very, very large figure. And, we're at the bottom of the creditors. The IRS is going to take all the money. So it's not like we're going to, be able to do that. And when you have all those full-time employees, there's so much of that. The other thing is, even the best employee, and I was saying this to someone earlier today, even the best team member, they will solve problems and they will hopefully do their job really well, but they all come with 20% trouble. As a human being, we all have issues. And the bigger the company and the more people that you hire, the more human trouble you're going to add to the company. And that's just something, I'm sure there's a much better definition of this, by the way. But it's just something to sort of think about. We're slowly switching people to freelance because it's just so much easier for everyone involved. And actually a lot of when my company has a policy, well, it's a very good policy of sort of no fixed working hours, all that kind of stuff, which worked really well at the beginning. But I also realized when you're everyone's friend and you hire people straight out of university without setting very clear boundaries and expectations, people will take advantage of your incredibly generous working environment. But it's just one of the learning experiences you have.
Yeah.
The other thing, just to finish off my monologue here, is the freelancers. The thing that I mainly look for in a team member out of pretty much everything is reliability. Someone I can just say they're going to get this job done, even if they're more expensive, difficult, whatever. Freelancers are really good for that. When you find the right people, for example, I've got a spreadsheet, or on Notion, I've got this table of freelancers I've worked with, and there's 5 5 graphic designers, 5 copywriters, 10 devs, and they're people I've worked with over the past 10 years, and they're really good at what they do. They're probably more expensive, they're often in demand, but when I work with them, I can rely on them. And freelancers offer a really nice decentralized network for that. TED Talk over, thank you.
I want to make sure in our last couple minutes we get a chance to get some questions from the audience. So if you're in the audience and you have any questions about hiring, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll do a couple lightning rounds on your questions to make sure we cover as many as possible. While we're waiting on questions to come in, a few of our audience members are marketers at startups who are just about to hire their first marketer or their first team. So I know a lot of what we've already talked about applies, but is there one thing you'd tell them in 15 to 30 seconds as they embark to hire their first marketing team or first marketer?
Yes. So I'm going to go back to the values thing. If you have not already written down what your values are, and that means that how do you make decisions? Because the most powerful use of me writing down our values was my ability to hire and fire. So if you haven't done that, do that. And if you have done it, go back and make sure that those are still the things that you're operating on.
Quick one on my side. If you're hiring your first employee, depending on the level they're at, but if they're kind of the mid-level, hire someone you can trust. Because if you can trust and you build a good relationship, they can become a senior employee of yours, and they can live your culture, basically. So I would say definitely hire in a first hire, unless it's a junior generalist role. If it's a bit more specific, like hire someone that you can see working for you in 3 to 5 years time at a much senior level. That's my 2 cents on it.
I really like. I think that's really good advice. You stole the good ones. I think give people like a difficult task to do. I find that for me, it really is. It's not the best, but it's a good way of like sort of seeing how does someone think about problem solving. And also like the more, this sounds very Yoda-ish, but the more you can understand yourself, the more effectively you'll be able to understand other people and like hire and run an effective business. Helped me a lot.
Yes, I'll double down on the do a test project. Like no interview is ever going to tell you how this person thinks through a problem or if they're going to adhere to your process.
Thanks, everyone. We're excited for the audience members who are hiring their first team members. Another questions come in. Reference checks. Do you find them helpful in the hiring process? Are they worth the time?
No.
Honestly, I don't
pay attention.
Yeah.
I don't ask for them either.
Yeah. People, if you ask a person to be a reference for you, they're going to give you a good reference.
Yeah.
It's just as simple as that. I think it's become a little bit jaded. That being said, some people that if you do your referencing properly, and you ask the pointed questions that a person doesn't have prepared in their mind, yeah, then references could potentially help. But for me, it's just a waste of a day to find references.
And
in the UK, you have to be there's like certain legality about what you can and can't say in a reference. So you have to be very factual. But it's interesting because there's like, I say references for me haven't proved to be very useful, but there was like a couple of times when someone was like, the way that someone answered the questions made me understand that they were not happy with that person.
It's not a game I like to play.
And in recruiting, where do you find the best candidates when they don't come to you, or their specific job boards that you like, or other mechanisms of finding people?
So for me, part of the foundation of being able to get the right people when I need them is having cultivated my membership in the communities where those people are hanging out. So there's a Slack community called Online Geniuses that has a ton of amazing marketers in it. And there's some other like WordPress specific communities that I'm a part of, but like finding your way into these existing networks of people so that when you need something, you can ask someone and you can go someplace where these people are already hanging out.
One thing that I do is I rely on my network. So my network are people I like, people I work with, and we all think the same. So often when I need that is I'll just throw it out to my network. Hey, you guys know if anyone's happening, they'll pass it on, and you just get the spider web of referrals. Typically, you get some pretty good hires out of that. So
I often I ask my good team members like, hey, who are your friends? I want to hire them. I've got really good results from messaging people on LinkedIn in jobs that just really match the type of person I'm looking for, and just being like, hey man, are you interested in changing your role? And like that works surprisingly well, which is weird because you can't really tell culture from a LinkedIn profile, sort of. I mean, depending on the role. The other thing that works well is looking at my DMs, speaking to my team, figuring out where the good people are, and like cold messaging people that you think are cool.
In our lightning round, I've got another question from the audience. I love the test project idea. I've got ideas for creative projects all day, but do you have any insight on good technical marketing test projects?
Yeah, definitely. It's a little bit more difficult. So often what I'll do is on the technical marketing side of things, I expect people to be able to write certain amounts of script, or this is now going very technical. So I'll give very basic little like JavaScript codes that they need to basically draft up for me. often what I'll do is I do have so one of the event-based tracking systems I use is Mixpanel. I create an instance of dummy data, create an instance and tell them, this is what I want. These are the 5 results I want. Build out a dashboard. I want to see it. So that's a really good way of having them be able to do the event-based tracking side of things, and me knowing whether they actually know what they're talking about or not. And you can read up very, very quickly in that process in those. And make it difficult. People that don't want to take on the difficulty, they're not people you want. Don't make a simple project that can. I hate to say this, and I don't mean to sound like a cynic, but don't make the project easy that anyone can do it. You know, make it where it's going to take them time to do it. Yes, it's paid, but make them actually do a bit of work, because otherwise you are going to get poor candidates. Those people that finish it, chances are they're interested.
Well, I'll double down on what Andrew's saying about the difficulty. When we define test projects, we expect them to need to come back for more information. Like, I actually need to know how you think through this project and that you are capable of asking for help. So, and like, you don't just, and we structure it into give them permission, because sometimes they are coming from places where they didn't have permission to ask for help, but that's critical if you're working in my company. So it'll be like, okay, here's the structure. Pick up the project. Let me know that you understand it. Then there's a check-in with me where like there's a forum already to ask questions. And yeah, make it difficult, because if they come with no questions, again, not a cultural fit for us.
Yeah.
All right. It is our last couple of minutes in the speediest of speed rounds. What are some of your most unconventional predictions for marketing in 2024?
I think Marcus is going to have to put on some new hats. I really do. And I think people, I'm not necessarily, because Daniel, you alluded to with the Gen Zs, like, all good, but I'm talking about kind of people mid-career, that kind of 8 to 15 years experience. Old dog, new tricks. It's more difficult. It is more difficult to pivot into that. And I think, unfortunately, what's going to happen now is people are going to, and if you don't progress, people are going to start falling back in their knowledge, falling back in their work, and unfortunately, they're going to get laid off. And a Gen Z who understands all of it comes in and takes over. So I think, yeah, we got to be very careful as marketers, but as hiring staff as well. Is making sure that we've got longevity ahead of us. No one knows what the future is going to look like, but hiring for that hungry person that's always going to learn.
I think we'll see another cycle of what's old, everything old is new again. So like everybody's predicted the demise of email marketing, and there's cookie apocalypse, and great. So billboards, print ads, like again, humans are creatures that crave novelty. So if you're looking for innovation, I don't think you have to invent the next VR thing. You probably just have to go look for a new way to use something that already exists.
I think from my perspective, like being able to understand how to use the tools, like I love ChatGPT and various tools like that. I think, I literally spent all day on it. I have spent far too much money on subscriptions, but you need to understand how to use the tools from why are we using this? It doesn't matter which tool you use, which one is the most appropriate one. And I think because everyone can call themselves a marketer, there's a lot of people who don't understand what motivates people. Why do people buy stuff? What incentivizes people? What is the psychology? And also what is the commercial understanding? If you can understand that, you can learn how to use the tools. I mean, in my opinion. And I think my unconventional prediction is that people are going to be going back to basics a little bit in terms of figuring out how does marketing work?
Go and do the professional certified marketer from the American Marketing Association will be taken back 20 years into the heaviest marketing kind of theory behind it. I just want to throw one quick little thing in. With test projects, I should have mentioned this. We've got to be very careful with our test projects that AI can't complete it. So if we're giving a coding example, make sure you put a variable in there that you'd very quickly be able to pick up that an AI has done it. So yeah, just be very wary. Sorry, I thought of it on the fly. Just for all the hiring people out there that are doing projects, just be make sure you make it bulletproof that an AI can't do it.
Makes sense. All right, we are at time. Thank you to all of our panelists. This was so helpful to both me and our audience, and we really appreciate it. As a reminder for the audience, if you want help with your hiring process, you can click the link in the comments to book a free call with Mayple, and we can help you find your marketer, including one of the marketers that you've met today. All right. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Cheers.